court cases. I can't tell you how many. I don't know. Many over the 13 years. And one thing I noticed, first thing they do in the jury selection is eliminate your peers. That's the first thing they do is eliminate your peers. Now, I went down for police assault. So they first eliminated everybody on the jury who saw a police assaulting somebody. They eliminated everybody who ever saw police assaulting somebody. They eliminated everybody who had a personal connection with a police assault. Then they began to look at skin color and dismiss privilege. Preemptory challenge. So they first eliminate everybody who are your peers. Now, some of these thugs and knuckleheads is being, and some of these people larcenous tendencies, and some people just innocent. But let's say if I did something. Let's say if I gave in to someone demanding that I find them some marijuana. Let's say I gave in to a SNUD unit, Lucky, that wanted me to get him some marijuana. And he's stressed out, and he calls you 14 times in one morning. Incessantly. He calls you, you go do that. Get here, man, please. And look, I don't even want to give it to you. There's the man who has the drugs, and this is, you want it. Why don't y'all get together? And they said, oh, no, we want you to do it. Why? Because the man who had the drugs was with the narc unit, and the man who was trying to get me to get some drugs was with the narc unit. Okay, let's say that happened to you. Well, they say, well, I know some of you ring off. That'll never happen. See, that's entrapment and that's illegal. Well, yeah, but if they don't enforce the law, it is of no effect. If you don't enforce the law, it's of no effect. It's okay. So let's say, okay, now I'm been found guilty of trafficking marijuana. Okay. So, let's say before I got found guilty. Let's say I maybe get found guilty. Okay, so we have a jury of our peers. Who are my peers? Who should my peers be? But all the people who's ever sold a joint, smoked a joint, shared a joint, sold a joint. Shouldn't that be your peers? After all, that's what you're about to be labeled. Why aren't your peers on there? You say, well, your peers are the people who voted. Well, did the accused vote? If he didn't vote, he's not a peer. And then let's say, well, you have to look at this voting trend. Did they vote for the same people? That's a group, a peer. Of course not. So you never had a jury of your peers. You never had a jury of your peers. You always had a conflict of interest when you went to have a lawyer. That's why the number one question on my phone message is, can you find a good lawyer? You know a good lawyer? Mm-hmm. The ones I know are way away from here. The ones who got people off death row for things they didn't commit. Attorney Stevenson, for example. Johnny Cochran, who's dead and at rest. These are the lawyers I knew, and these are lawyers that are not available for you. So you have two major proofs that the system is majorly flawed. You have the inherent conflict of interest of a lawyer, and you have the fact that you have never, nor will you ever, get a jury of your peers. And those are critical linchpins of a just system. You won't get it.
It is a serious mistake, both tactical and moral, for us to ever believe this is a fight that ought to be or should be waged by black Americans alone. That has never been so in centuries past. It ought not be so in the century unfolding now.
How about this? I'm sorry that our government enslaved black people, and I'm sorry that because of slavery, black people were cut off from their culture and had their families ripped apart generation after generation, were raped and beaten and killed and tortured with impunity, and then after slavery, blacks were lynched freely, with the government turning a blind eye and sometimes even encouraging it, and that property was stolen, and that the government encouraged and subsidized white homeowners only for decades. The government speeded the decline of inner cities by building freeways so that white flight could occur to the suburbs. that at every level, store owners and employers and homeowners and banks, and law enforcement, and courts and legislatures and planning commissions and schools and churches openly and blatantly discriminated against blacks for generations and imposed scars that still linger. And because of all those practices, if they have come to an end, that they've come to an end only very recently. But that very little has been done ever to make up for any of that deprivation and cruelty. And that when we flee the inner cities and go to public schools or only fight to protect the privileged majority white schools or only fight to protect the privileged majority white school systems, but I'm sorry that blacks are routinely and unfairly singled out by law enforcement, scrutinized more closely, convicted more easily, sentenced to longer terms, punished more harshly. Media portrayals, some of them sadly accurate, tend to exaggerate and be stereotypical. All of these images are part of my socialization so that I'm embarrassed about the fact that my first instinct is to fear or to pity black people when I meet them. For all those things, I'm sorry, and my regret is sincere, and to show it, I will strive to recognize my privilege, to have insight about my own instincts, and not to deny that racism exists. And I'll support efforts to provide support for declining public schools, or for drug programs, or for urban renewal efforts, or for employment or poverty programs that are aimed at addressing some of these things. And I won't argue that money will be wasted on these people, and I won't claim that it's not my responsibility. That were the apology that I think I apologize for.
Can we really be free?
It's the Lion of Judah.
Lord,
Judah.
Lord,
It's the
conquering
Lion of Judah.
We'd like to impose a few other questions to you, if you don't mind. People say, think globally, act locally. I see you think globally, but how do you think we should all act locally?
For example, the dollar is a created currency that is kept in short supply on purpose. And because of that, many of the services that the citizens need locally, the money is not available for that. But if we would practice new trade currencies, such as the Imani currency, and begin to use your time on the weekend for doing those things that are right, in other words, trade your skills in exchange for the things and services that you need, then we'll be able to mitigate the misery of poverty, and we'll begin to come together and lose fear of each other, and then begin to build our community and establish our communities, and then link our communities, leverage our communities together for greater good and for regional and world peace. There's too much misery based on the scarcity of money. But through the Imani currency and other trade for services, action, we can begin to